Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm just about ready to get started. Good morning again to all our friends and colleagues in the Philippines. First of all, we do hope that you are well and keeping safe in these rather challenging times, both with your businesses and also with your families. My name is Larissa Kaito. I'm the Wheat Quality Technical Markets Manager with AGIC, and I do believe that I had the pleasure of meeting most of you before COVID hit in those good times when we used to often meet in the Philippines. We do hope to see you face to face soon again. Today's webinar on Australian wheat and oats for the Philippines noodle market webinar is organised and brought to you by the Australian Export Grains Innovation Centre. And again, I'm sure that most of you are fairly familiar with us, with AGIC, as we've met most of you in our previous trips to your country. AGIC is Australia's leading organisation for market insight, innovation and applied solutions. So we basically work closely together with our grains industry to better support or service you, our customers. We also need to work very closely with you to better understand your needs, your requirements, so that we can better support you in extracting greater value out of Australian grain. So today we've combined wheat and oats, so two slightly different crops, should we say, but with one end product in common, which we'll cover throughout today's proceedings. So we will be talking about the quality and functionality of Australian wheat and Australian oats for noodle applications specifically. So for that reason, today I've got one of my team members with me, Dr. Shubori Mitra, who is Australia's leading expert on oats. And a little bit later, she'll give you some insights on the quality functionality of our oats, as well as a little bit of insight into some of our research and innovation on bringing oats beyond just a breakfast dish, so using oats in applications like noodles, rice, and some other products as well. So in addition to that, we have a couple of other presentations for you today. One on the quality again and functionality of our wheat for your yellow alkaline noodles. And our last presentation will be on perhaps some opportunities for a bit of collaboration between AGIC and the Philippines milling and noodle industry in particular, to look at some opportunities about using or how we could use Australian noodle wheat specifically to develop new products with unique textural properties, noodle products, but also any other flour-based products. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in my second presentation today. We do also have a bit of an interactive component of today's webinar. Then maybe we'll take a bit of a break from presenting and would like to invite you, our customers, to provide us with your input, opinion or feedback on your quality requirements, wheat or flour quality requirements for your noodle products. Some of you in the audience will be fairly familiar with AGIC's wheat quality surveys, which we've conducted with you previously in our face-to-face meetings. Obviously that right now traveling and face-to-face meetings aren't quite possible, so we're utilizing the technology as best as we can to still engage with you and stay on top on your quality and your needs again, so that we can better support you. But again, I'll briefly introduce the surveys after my first presentation and just before we go into actually participating, hopefully all of us, and completing our surveys. Before we get started, just a couple of little housekeeping items. We will have allocated a little bit of time at the end of the webinar, or as much time as required, to answer all your questions or comments or feedback. So please, however, ask your questions at any time throughout our 3 presentations. Use, please, the Q&A tab to ask your questions, and we will address all of the questions after the last presentation. If you do experience any technical issues in connecting to today's webinar, or seeing or hearing us, please use the chat tab. Let us know what the issue is, and our IT expert should be able to support you or help you through any issues of technical or IT nature. So with that, I think we're probably just about ready to get started with the first presentation. Please, as we said, do use the interactive feature of the Zoom and ask as many questions as you can, or comments by using the Q&A tab. So we'll start today with our first presentation, which I'll present on Australian wheat for premium yellow alkaline noodles. So what I'd like to briefly cover here today is why do we suggest Australian wheat as the best choice for your noodles? What are the benefits to the customers like yourselves in the Philippines? What are the benefits to the millers and or noodle makers? We'll talk about some quality of Australian wheat in yellow alkaline noodle applications using some examples from our most recent 2020-21 crop. So firstly, most of you will be well aware that our industry, our milling industry, is still entirely based on white wheat. So white coating of the bran versus dark red. And so that has significant and direct impact or advantages on milling yield, but not just the milling yield, cleanliness, lower ash of the flour, flour with less bran or speck contamination. We all, the noodle makers in the audience will know that cleaner flour will always result in brighter or cleaner looking, better appearance of our noodles. Our relatively speaking clean, dry and food safe environment again results in a crop that's lower in moisture content than most other origins, therefore high or sound falling numbers, again directly resulting in advantages for milling efficiency, and also not just the look of our noodles, but also texture of our noodles can be, of course, adversely impacted by higher moisture or lower falling numbers. Milling quality and efficiency is really a strong focus of our classification industry, as breeding companies in particular developing new lines have to pass rather harsh hurdles to demonstrate quality, particularly milling efficiency of their new lines or lines in development. And beyond development of new lines and classification, whole of the industry quality management throughout a supply chain. So from farmers delivering their crop into the receival to that grain being graded into different grades and classes, all the way to managing that quality during the storage time, all the way until it actually goes onto the ships and reaches our customers. So throughout all of industry, supply chain quality management. So when we think about Asian noodles, or our wheat for different Asian noodle applications, we typically tend to think about Northern and Southeast Asian markets as two main regions, giving us many different examples of different types of noodles for which we as an industry, either breeding varieties or classifying varieties, need to cater for in terms of making sure basically that varieties meet required color stability or textural eating quality basically of those noodles. So typically in the North Asian markets, we tend to classify our noodles or our crop, basically our grades, as being suitable, for example, for the Japanese style udon or the white salted noodles in Korea, or yellow alkaline premium ramen style in Japan again. And so we tend to think about quality requirements, particularly starch quality, protein quality, in addition, of course, to grain quality, milling efficiency, color stability, and so on. And so our tests here are designed in such a way to make sure that we test for exactly same attributes in those noodles as our customers would in any of those markets. When it comes to Southeast Asian markets, as you can see, there's quite a few more examples there, and this is just really a snapshot perhaps of the most commonly found types throughout Southeast Asian region. Probably in addition to just many different types in different countries of Southeast Asia, there's a rather significant regional difference within the same country on different quality requirements. So an example here, for example, instant noodles in your market compared to, for example, instant noodles in the Indonesian market. Part of what our technical team really needs to be on top of is what are the quality requirements, how are they different, for example, between the two countries, or let alone throughout the rest of Southeast Asia. And so that's what my team spends a lot of time on, understanding what the markets require, how do we implement the best possible tests to measure our wheat or to test our wheat, and how do we then work with the breeding community here to make sure that the lines in development actually meet your requirements. So I'd like to start today reflecting back on some of our previous work in your market on understanding exactly that. What is the functionality, or what are your preferred quality attributes? And so just before COVID, as you know, we've visited quite a few times, talked to quite a few of you in the milling and noodle making industry to really understand among many different wheat quality attributes, and we all know there are many that really matter, and all are important. But our purpose here was really to understand what is really most critical and most important. And so it was very interesting and pleasing to see that the response from the Philippines was very similar to the response from many other countries in the Southeast Asian region. And that was that really the end product quality was critical to most of the millers and, of course, noodle makers, because we all understood that is really important and very critical for our consumers. Because the only way a consumer will come back to purchase the same brand of noodles or any other product is if they're satisfied after their first experience. And so with noodles here, we see that particularly the eating quality in the Philippines, so the balance, I guess, of firmness, softness, elasticity, and chewiness was quite important for millers to achieve in milling their flour for their noodle customers, and then for noodle makers to make the best possible noodles out of that flour for their customers. Of course, in addition to noodle texture, there's a few other quality traits: protein content or strength of gluten, color stability as well, brightness of both flour and noodles. And so this was really important for us to understand, to work with our industry to either improve our existing quality of varieties or wheat, maintain and where possible improve that quality, particularly as breeders move on and start developing new lines. But it was also quite critical for us here, a technical team of AGIC, to understand so that we can implement, as I mentioned, best possible ways or tests to measure and test our wheat and our varieties and make sure that those are meeting customer expectations. So I'll take you now through some examples of how we go about here, capturing either objectively and or subjectively quality of our wheat and or wheat of other origins, to understand not just how good or how suitable our wheat is, say, for example, for your noodles, but also how do we compare to some some of our competitors in the market. So an example here is between different noodle quality traits, if you like. We probably often, most of us think about color and texture as being two key quality traits of our noodles. However, under the color component itself, there's probably quite a few different terms that we often use. So appearance, or the brightness or cleanliness of our noodles, or noodle sheets, if you like, but also color stability, particularly important for fresh noodles. Maybe not so critical for instant noodles, but quite important for our fresh noodles. So an example here, as you can see, we're using Australian white wheat, relatively speaking, similar or same extraction rate, same protein content compared to red wheat. So our starting position here with white wheat, which is a primary reason why our industry here is still focused and committed to only breeding and growing white wheat, particularly for Asian markets and the noodle applications, is exactly this, that just the fact that we have that white or lighter looking brand, we have an immediate advantage on brighter or lighter looking noodles, if you like. At the end of the day, we all know that flour millers, most flour millers on the planet will blend wheats according to, for many reasons, depending on their requirements, often also depending, of course, what's available in any given season from different origins. So we can see that with blending, so this is a simple 50-50 blend example, you can see that your noodles, the appearance or the color can be improved with Australian wheat. Not as good as 100%, but still some improvements are possible through blending as well. An example here is of our 2021 harvest. So the dark blue bars are samples out of Australian crop, so Western Australia on the left, ranging from AH and APW from different regions in Western Australia. Then we've got a few samples out of South Australia and Victorian also region, compared to Black Sea and South American crop. And in this case, we plotted here appearance of noodles, if you like. So basically color of noodles, so the difference here between whiteness and yellowness of noodles measured at time zero. So the higher the bars, basically the lighter or cleaner looking, cleaner appearance of the noodles. So what we want to see is basically the higher the bars, the better looking our noodles. So firstly, pleasing to see that we've, with our white wheat, that we may retain that significant advantage compared to red wheat. But again, what's quite important for us, my technical team here at AGIC, but also our industry, to identify that we do have a little bit of variation among our crop between different environments, seasons perhaps, and the grades. So part of the job, a big part of the job for my team here is to identify the variations, understand what's caused the variation, and work with our largely breeders and or other research organisations in Australia to improve where possible and as much as possible, so that our customers experience best possible or gain greater value of using our wheat for their noodle applications. Another example here, basically from the same test, still measuring colour of our noodles. It's a trait that we don't often talk about, A star on a Minolta measurement here, so objective measure of colour, and A star here compared to LNB actually measures the spectrum of colour going from green to red. So what we're capturing here over a period of time is the change of colour and understanding whether that change is going more towards dark, red, brownish looking noodles, or whether that colour is, in this case, staying more around zero or neutral, if you like, between green and red shades. So what you can see here is significant change of the red wheat towards more really dark brown looking noodles compared to lesser change and also more neutral change of our noodles. And I'll just quickly play the little video as well. So what's shown here is the the color of noodles at time 0. And so you can again see the noodles being brighter already, and you'll also notice over the period of time, 6, 12, 18 to 24 hours, again, faster and also more significant darkening in the red wheat example compared to the white wheat noodles. Between the two quality traits, color and texture, I think probably most of us will agree that texture is a little bit more challenging to not just measure, but to really put into the context of eating our noodles. So here at AGIC, we utilize few different methods to really best capture physical properties of our noodles, and then try and put that into the context of sensory experience of our customers or consumers eating those noodles. So we measure firmness few different ways, using a cutting blade, largely actually just measuring the initial hardness or bite of those noodles. We also utilize a triple cutting rig method, which measures firmness of bulk quantity of noodles, so larger surface area, gives us a little bit more feel for firmness firmness, but also a bit of a balance of firmness and chewiness of our noodles. Compression and relaxation test with a flat round probe, and also quite commonly used throughout Southeast Asia, a tensile or a stretchiness, if you like, test, which in simple terms, a strand or number of strands of noodles are pulled apart, and what we're measuring is resistance to breaking, basically. So the longer our noodle strands can resist to breaking, the better overall mouthfeel of those noodles is. On the chart here again, yellow alkaline noodles and the initial firmness measured by the triple cutting rig. Largely what we're really measuring here is the impact of protein content on that initial hardness or the initial bite. So we don't get a feel here for the balance of firmness and softness. We don't get a feel here for any chewiness or elasticity in our noodles. All we're measuring is that initial hardness. In some cases, that's all what our customers want to achieve, and that's all what consumers perhaps think about, and so that's fine. But in a lot of other cases, most of our consumers talk beyond that initial firmness. So they talk about the mouthfeel, the balance of different physical properties of noodles. But just quickly here again, some Australian grades, AH from WA, Western Australia and New South Wales, and APW from New South Wales. Largely, as you can see, impact of protein content, maybe a bit of gluten strength as well compared to North American crop, South American, and again an example from the Black Sea. So we can see that in terms of just that initial hardness, largely, as I said, influenced by the protein content, strong stable wheats out of US perform rather well, if that's all we want, the initial hardness. But otherwise, if you look at the Australian examples, again, there's a range based on protein content, a little bit difference in protein strength, and we know here, the higher the protein, typically the firmer that initial hardness. However, if we go about and want to understand our noodles beyond just the initial hardness or that first bite, we typically here cook our noodles for the second time and or slightly overcook our noodles to really understand the tolerance, if you like, of that gluten and starch matrix to overcooking. Perhaps the easiest to explain that, if I can draw your attention to the red line here, which is our AH sample from Western Australia, and the green line here, which is our Black Sea sample. So you can see that at the initial measurement, the firmness of both samples was fairly, just about almost same. However, once we overcook our noodles slightly by a couple of minutes to understand how how much can they tolerate actually in terms of abusive cooking, if you like, you'll see a much faster rate of loss of that texture, of that initial firmness in the green line, i.e. the Black Sea sample, compared to the red line, i.e. the AH Western Australian sample. So at the second time of cooking, what we need to understand here, it's the firmness at the second time of cooking, but it's also the rate of the loss of that firmness that's actually quite critical to then put into the context our objective measure with the sensory attributes that consumers actually experience and call mouthfeel at the end of the day when they're consuming our noodles. A little bit more detail, just focusing now on our 2021 crop. Some examples here for the tensile rig, so that's the stretchiness of our noodles. And again, triple cutting ring, giving you measure of initial firmness and also overcooking measure. So that's the light blue bars, overcooking. And so typically what we want to see is less difference between first and second measurement here. But if I can just draw your attention again, maybe the couple of APW samples here to explain again what we look for and how do we place the objective values into the sensory context of or mouthfeel of our noodles. So on the tensile test here, if you look at the APW sample from South Australia and APW sample from our East Coast, again, similar firmness at our initial measure, so similar protein content, similar firmness. The two samples, as you can see, differ quite drastically in their extensibility or their elasticity. So basically, stretching the noodles, one will snap faster than the other, and so that's really indication of not just how, well, firstly, how resistant, particularly the gluten, I guess, or the matrix of gluten and starch is to breaking, but also gives us more of a feel for that mouthfeel and balance of firmness and chewiness. And so that's exactly what you can see here in this example of white wheat versus red wheat. So what we want to see is that longer retention to breaking and associate that with the balance in particular, which is quite hard to objectively or physically measure, but we often get that feedback from our customers and consumers. It's the balance of firmness and softness and elasticity and chewiness, and in some cases, a bit of stickiness that I'm actually looking for in ideal noodles. So just a quick overview or summary then of the main benefits of white Australian wheat for noodle applications specifically. Safe, clean, dry environment, resulting in lower moisture content in particular, which is a direct advantage to flour millers in terms of less water, more wheat, of course, but also direct advantage to the millers and noodle makers by cleaner and sound wheat, i.e. higher falling numbers. White wheat industry, I think we've seen and demonstrated brighter, cleaner looking noodles compared to most other origins. Functionality is really a focus of our classification system to make sure that our grades and classes have got required functionality either for specific products, so for example, udon noodles for the Japanese market, or yellow alkali noodles for the Southeast Asian market, or in some grades that the functionality is there for our wheat to blend easily with either higher protein, stronger origins, or even in some cases lower protein, soft perhaps wheats for various applications. Brighter colour of flour leads to brighter, better looking noodles. Stability of that colour is always better if we start with brighter, cleaner looking noodles. the combination of firmness and elasticity is quite important for that mouthfeel of noodles. And so the combination of the traits here, so the value of our wheat for Southeast Asian noodle applications. So with that, I would like to now move on to our little interactive segment, i.e. our wheat quality surveys. Quality really is quite important and critical to our industry, and particularly to our technical team here in AGIC, and we do believe that better wheat quality will always give you better, or as we say here, more delicious noodles. On top of that, it is really critical for us to understand your needs and your requirements. The only best way for us to support you as best as we can in using our wheat is to understand what quality traits do you actually value and you'd like to see in our wheat for your products in your market. So I would like for all of you in the audience to please participate in our wheat quality surveys over the next 15 to 20 minutes. As I mentioned earlier, most of you in the audience will be familiar with these surveys. We have conducted them with you in our face-to-face meetings earlier. However, now we are forced to use our online and Zoom technology to, as I say, stay engaged and make sure that we have the knowledge of your markets that we need so that we can continue to support you as best as we can. Just before we go into the surveys, I would like to just briefly share with you how AGIC here, how we have used your feedback from our previous surveys with our industry here and implemented or initiated some research so that we can service you better. What we've learned clearly from not just the Philippines, but Southeast Asian markets in general is that as a supplier of white wheat for noodle making in particular, our industry needs to stay on top of and maintain as a very minimum our colour and colour stability advantages compared to other origins. So a big component of our research here is looking into exactly that, not just maintaining but improving appearance of our noodles, if you like, compared to other origins. We've also understood very clearly that texture is critical and that perhaps our wheat can do slightly better, and particularly for those customers, as I mentioned earlier, who really only are chasing and really interested in that initial firmness. So part of our research here is now working closely with our breeding community to not just implement best tests to capture that firmness and or textural properties, but also support our breeders in developing the lines that would fit your requirements. We've also clearly, well, we are not addressing baking today, but one of our recommendations to the industry was also that our markets really require not just noodle wheat from Australia, but also wheat with good baking quality and also wheat with soft wheat with qualities required for your cookies, biscuits and cakes. So AGIC is now leading research here with our industry on looking into strategies and again supporting our breeders developing better baking lines. We call them here elite baking lines. And also AGIC leads now research in our industry on firstly understanding exactly Southeast Asian requirements for soft wheat, and also at the same time already working closely with our breeders, helping them develop those soft wheat lines for Southeast Asian requirements specifically. So based on this, all has come from our previous surveys, understanding your quality requirements. We have already initiated and are leading some of the research here and strategically working with our industry to continue to better support you. We've also listened to you and made our surveys a little bit user-friendly, if you like. So we now offer surveys on the range of the devices, anywhere from your mobile phone to your laptops to your desktops. So it's as easy as having a mobile phone and completing our surveys within 10 or 15 minutes. Surveys are strictly confidential. We will, once we get the results from all of our markets, summarize those and, of course, share those with you. I'm hoping that that's perhaps going to be in a face-to-face meeting, but if not, certainly through a webinar like this one today. Not just share with you, but at that stage, discuss and confirm those results with you before we would share with our industry. So with that, again, would please like you all to participate in today's survey. Very shortly, we will paste a link to those survey in our chat tab. The surveys are on behalf of our industry and are conducted only for the reasons that we as an industry can support you better in using our bit. So with that, let's start the surveys. As I said, you can either with your phone scan the QR code that you can see on the screen right now, or please go into the chat tab, copy, paste the link from the chat into your either laptop or whatever device you're on right now. Please remember, it is your opinion of your market, your business, your quality requirements. There's no right or wrong answers here. All we would like to know from you as our valued customers is what do you like to see improved, particularly in our aid? How can we support you better? So with that, perhaps I'll pause for about 15 or 20 minutes. We'll let you complete those surveys. I would like to thank you in advance for your input and your feedback. We will stay online all the time, so please, if you do have a question about a survey specifically at this time, if you're struggling to connect to the surveys, let us know. We should be able to help you. We will be online to help you with the surveys. But perhaps I'll stop talking for about 15 minutes, as I said, and thank you again for participating in our quality surveys. We will resume with the rest of the program in about 15 to 20 minutes time.
I think we're all going pretty well. We haven't had any or experienced any issues with connecting to the survey. So thank you very much all again for participating and completing our quality surveys. We will resume with the rest of the webinar in about 10 minutes time.
Okay, thank you very much all again.
For participating and completing our wheat quality surveys. We will resume with the program in about 5 minutes' time. Okay, I think we are just about ready to
start with the reminder of our program. Thank you all very much again for your input, the time, and your opinion on your quality requirements. If by a chance you haven't had enough time to complete the surveys, we would still like to ask you to please do so throughout the rest of the day. You can go back to the surveys at any time. The survey will remember where you left, and so you will be able to just continue from where you left. So if the time allocated just now wasn't quite enough to get you through the entire survey, we please again would appreciate your input and would like to ask you to, if you can please complete them throughout the rest of, or before the end of today, that would be great. Okay, so I would now like to spend a little bit of time and just talk to you about, as I mentioned earlier, perhaps an opportunity for the Philippines flour milling and noodle making industry in particular to collaborate with AGIC and look at some new product development opportunities with our noodle wheat. Some of you in the audience in the Philippines, I believe, will be familiar with our ANW, so Australian noodle wheat, and APWN, Australian Premium Noodle Wheat, for specifically developed for a very unique noodle type applications, i.e. in our case, the Japanese and Korean style white salted noodles. However, the reason we would like to spend a little bit of time today and talk about unique quality of these two classes is for the reasons, the uniqueness, it's really related to the functionality and quality of starch in these two classes. And we do believe that there's an opportunity to develop a range of different textural properties in your wheat flour-based products. It doesn't have to be noodles necessarily, but any wheat flour-based products where you think you'd like to differentiate texture of your products to anyone else on the market. We believe there might be an opportunity to collaborate and explore options of how we could utilize our noodle wheat in your applications. Just very briefly, as I mentioned, in our system, we refer to the two classes as specialty types. So compared to APH, AH, APW, which are kind of our mainstream milling classes, the two here are so-called specialty types, specifically developed, as I mentioned, for white salted noodles and also instant noodles in Korea and Japan. Uniqueness, it's really the quality, genetically different starch quality to our other milling wheats, and in fact to most other origins, if not any other origins that you might see in your market. In addition to starch, of course, the focus on milling quality, milling performance, color stability, it remains just about same, if not a little bit stricter in these two classes compared to our other milling classes. So we're still after that good milling efficiency, bright, clean noodles with good color stability. Addition here is the ability to really look at the gristing of these two grades at different ratios and or in fact with other milling types available out of Australia to develop a range of different textures. So what's really different here is just briefly it's the ratio of amylose and amylopectin in these two classes, so making the two what we call here partial waxy. So compared to most of you, I believe, will be familiar with completely waxy, so zero amylose wheat. So here we're talking about higher amylopectin, lesser amylose content, making the two classes so-called partial waxy. It's the partial waxy types of starch in these two classes that we would like to explore in utilizing, as I said, either as A&W 100% or APW and 100%, or the blend of the two, or blending the two, for example, with something like APH or AH and or APW for that matter, to create a range of different textural experiences for your customers, if you like. In addition to starch, as I said, and it's really that partial waxy starch that gives us a feel or simulates wheat-based products to those experiencing rice-like texture, if you like. So if you think of rice cakes, for example, nice, soft, balanced, chewy textural properties. That's what we are looking for, or that's what we experience with this with the type of starches in A&W and APWN. Most of our customers or current customers of the two classes use predominantly these two classes for specialty noodle types. However, to some extent also in some other applications, including baking, for example. And I'll show you some examples out of a bit of preliminary work that my team has done, how we could potentially place some of this wheat into baked goods, for example. Before we go there, just a bit of an overall quality spectrum of the two classes. So A&W and APWN are typically currently segregated at a very tight protein window. In addition to that, as I said, so ranging, catering for quality requirements of anywhere from softer to medium to firmer noodles. We can blend either the two together or the two with other milling classes to cater for that firmness, but it's really this uniquely different starch that brings in other textural properties in our products. So beyond protein content, it's really this the starch of the two classes that we look for in our grits and blends to develop different products and differentiate those products based on texture. So how do we go here about really just specifically looking into that starch component? So in addition to many other ways of measuring or testing our starch, we often here utilize a device called Mixolab to really understand not just necessarily starch, but the entire dough properties, from understanding the protein, the hydration, but specifically, as I said, our big focus here is on this middle portion or right-hand side of this chart, where we, during the testing, actually increase the temperature and look at specific starch properties, anywhere from gelatinization properties, pasting, all the way to retrogradation properties of that starch. One of the reasons we use Mixolab here is because it allows us, unlike viscograph or RVA, for example, here we are actually looking at a fully hydrated and fully formed dough rather than just a slurry of flour and water like we do in some other pasting tests only. An example of our partial waxes, a Mixolab example is shown here. So the red line here, it's our partial waxes, so A&W. Light blue line is our APWN, and the bottom line, the dark line here, is what we call normal. So that's our AH or APW or APH, so normal starch, basically, non-partial waxing. And so really our main interest, as I said, is in this region of the chart, is to understand how the partial waxes add the ability for us to manipulate texture in a range of different products. For noodle applications, for example, we understand very well that this region here, we call it cooking stability of starch. So our partial waxes directly relate this cooking stability to the texture of Japanese udon noodles or Korean white salted noodles. So what we'd like to understand, can we, and we believe on the preliminary experiments we've done that we can use the starch here in baking sweet buns or making other noodles, so blending partial waxes with higher protein with, for example, with customers, in addition to starch textural differences, would also like firmer noodles to create noodles of different textural properties. Understanding retrogradation properties of our partial waxes versus normal starch wheat, it's also quite important, particularly you know, for instant noodle applications, which I think might be of interest for some of you in the Philippines market. So I've mentioned briefly, in addition to starch, our requirements for color really don't change or remain similar to requirements of any wheat for color, brightness and appearance of our noodle products. This is just a quick example to show you what range of brightness here with L star, the top left hand corner chart, the yellowness of our noodles, the top right hand corner chart, and again our little A star value, the spectrum of green to red of our noodles. This is a very simple yellow alkaline and white salted noodle formulation. So yellow alkaline dark blue bars and white salted noodle light blue bars. Very basic, simple noodle formulation, just to really see the actual difference of the flour or wheat itself. We can, as I mentioned, depending on your requirements, generate a range of different colors, just using different proportions of the two classes. We can give anything from white to creamy to yellow-looking noodles without using any additional ingredients, which of course can be done as well if that's what you desire. Particularly if you like to go into that really very, very yellow looking noodle styles. Similar again, texture, we go about many different ways to capture that texture and to understand how the two contribute to different textural properties of noodles. Again, here we are looking at our tensile test and our triple cutting ring test. And again, looking at a very basic yellow alkaline and a very basic white salted noodle formulation. By very basic, I mean flour, water, and salt only. So we're not looking at any additional ingredients here, like we might start doing if your interest, for example, is to look at instant noodles or any other products. But this is just to show you the differences that we can create just from wheat or flour, rather, of this partial waxy wheat to generate that unique mouthfeel, like, as I said, rice cake texture. So a couple of examples that we've explored already is not using 100% of our A&W or APWN to bake, of course, because the type of wheats are more mellow, weaker protein, beta gluten network. So they're really not meant to be utilized 100% as baking wheats. But blending or grисting of A&W or APWN with, for example, AH is quite possible. And the reason why we would do that, for example, pan bread applications or sweet buns, pandesal perhaps for the Philippines market applications, is to create a unique crumb texture and a unique experience for our customers of that crumb texture. So we need some AH, for example, or higher protein, stronger wheats to help us develop that gluten and structure of our bread, but the partial waxes would add that moistness, silkiness, softness to our crumb.
We had a go at some dumplings, so it's a bit more development there to do, but again, it's that textural difference that we're looking for, which we've achieved with about, the examples here are about 10 to 15% of the partial waxes with other types of wheat in our milling grades. So the opportunity here is to collaborate with us. We will follow up with some of you after the webinar to understand your interest in perhaps looking into some of these examples more closely with us. We would also appreciate any comments or feedback from you, and certainly feel free to contact us at any time if you either wish to collaborate, or certainly if there's more perhaps technical information required on the two types of wheat that I've mentioned or introduced briefly to you today. There's certainly much more information that we would be really keen to share if you're interested to find out more about how this particular starch quality can be utilized perhaps in your market. It's largely, as I said, functionality and versatility of the starch, of the partial waxy starch, that we can manipulate in different mixtures, different grists, to develop new products and develop different textural experiences for our customers. I do look forward to your feedback, and as I said, our team here is rather well placed and more than happy to work closely with you and perhaps explore some of those opportunities for the Philippines market. So with that, I might actually take a bit of a break and we'll move into the segment of our webinar to again introduce to the Philippines quality and functionality of our oats, and explore again our interests to work and collaborate with us, and see if and how we can best support you. So to do that, I will invite Dr. Shabori Mitra, as I mentioned, one of my team members who is our leading expert on oat quality, has done her PhD on understanding the quality and functionality of Australian oats, and since completing her PhD has been with us here in AGIC, leading our research and particularly innovation in utilising oat grain in a range of different applications. So with that, I'll let her convince us all why we should all be eating more oats. So thank you, Shabori.
Thanks, Larissa. Good morning, everyone. So I'll be talking to you all today about the Australian grain industry and technical application of oats in healthy food products. So in Australia, we grow about 1.3 million tons of oats annually, and it is the fourth largest single crop grown here, and is a valuable part of farm rotation in production regions, and it is frost tolerant, and therefore there is reduced production risk. Oats are usually grown in the stable wheat region, which is a very stable region, and therefore there is low volatility in the production volume, and it's available both from the west and the east coast. Some of the Australian oat processors are Blue Lake Milling, Uncle Toby's, and Quaker Oats. And the oats grown on the east coast are mainly used for domestic consumption, and therefore the processing is domestic focused, whereas from west coast the oat grains are usually exported, and therefore the processing is also export focused. So here you can see there are the top 20 export destinations, and clearly we can see that China is the biggest market for Australian oats. And in comparison to that, Southeast Asia is a smaller market. However, AGIC as well as Australian oat industry, it aims to support and grow the use of Australian oats in Southeast Asia. And we want to grow from the small base through technical help, through technical support. We hope to bring the quality, the functionality and health benefits of oats into the Southeast Asian market. However, we have very limited understanding of these markets, and we are looking at collaborative opportunities to understand this market better. So the quality of Australian oats are highly regarded by the international market because of its low moisture, bright color, plump grain, and they are free from pests and any chemical contamination. Oats are considered as healthy superfoods, and one of the main reasons is because it has beta-glucan, which is a soluble fiber, and they are known to have a lot of health benefits, which are, it helps to reduce the blood cholesterol and improve heart health. It is proven to control blood glucose as well as obesity, and also has a lot of anti-cancerous effect. Therefore, the following health bodies have permitted the health claims related to beta-glucan and its cholesterol-lowering effect. Therefore, oat can be used as a vehicle to reduce the health burden for Australian as well as Asian customers. Some of the lifestyle diseases such as diabetes, we see that 60% of diabetics in the world live in Asia, and 30% of Chinese population is affected by pre-diabetes and diabetes. Also, for heart diseases, we see that Asia accounts for half of the world's heart disease cases, and 20 to 30% of total death in urban Southeast Asian countries are due to heart diseases. Therefore, if one can eat 3 grams of beta-glucan, which is available from 75 grams of oats per day, it will help to lower blood cholesterol and improve heart health. So looking into these health benefits of oats in AGIC, we have focused on moving oats beyond breakfast to go-to option for lunch and dinner. So that consumers have more options to eat oats other than just breakfast, and thereby this will automatically increase their consumption of oats and this will improve their health. So in Asia, there are 3 distinct types of oat products, one being the established one, which we are all aware of and more common is the rolled oat style products like oatmeal. Then there is developing products like oat noodles and oat rice. And then there is growing products like beverage, bakery, and snack bar. However, there is limited understanding of the functionality and quality requirements of oats for new oat-based food products in these markets. Along with that, there are limitations for Asian oat product growth, and some of these limitations are one being the market barriers. In our in-market work in China, we saw that some of the prices of these oat products, such as oat rice, was sometimes 6 times higher than the staple white rice available, and that probably is one of the barriers for people to choose oat rice. Some of the investments are not focusing on these, lack of investments in these spaces. There is also lack of innovative marketing strategies for ready-to-eat and convenient style of oat food product. Some of the technical barriers are in processing. Sometimes processors use not very superior quality oat grains, which are locally available, and thereby not good quality products are produced. There is also lack of standardized processing technology where varied range of oat quality products are produced and available in the market shelves. And also in product quality, sometimes processors overlook the nutritional aspect of oats and they overprocess, removing the beta-glucan or the goodness from the grains, and thereby one ends up with a product which doesn't have much health benefits left in it. Also, sometimes processors under process the oat grain, and thereby not removing the rancidity causing enzyme, reducing the shelf life of these products on market shelves. So in Egypt, over years, we have been working through various projects to overcome some of these barriers. And we have done some collaborative work with China to benchmark Australian oats versus Chinese oats in terms of the grain quality as well as processing of different Asian-based oat products. And some of that work I will be discussing in the following slide. However, in Egypt, we want to continue engaging with other Asian markets for Australian oats going forward. So to compare the nutritional composition between Australian and Chinese oats, we saw that both Australian and Chinese oats have significant amount of beta-glucan to provide health benefits. But if you look at the starch content, Australian oats have higher starch content in comparison to Chinese oats because they are plumper grains. And if you look at the photographs below, photo A and B, we see beta-glucan is indicated through the blue fluorescence. And we see in B, photograph B, that there is excessive accumulation of beta-glucan around the periphery of the grain, and therefore less energy is available within the grain for starch filling for the oat grain. However, for the photograph A, we see that there is optimum accumulation of beta-glucan in the periphery of the grain, and therefore there is enough energy available for proper grain filling to form a plump grain, which is what happens for Australian oats as they are growing. So what makes a good oat product? Well, if we have an oat grain that has very high amount of beta-glucan, but low grain quality, it produces oat products which probably will not have good sensory or eating quality. If we have an oat grain that has very low amount of beta-glucan and good grain quality, we might end up with a product that is appealing to the sensory panelists, or it's good in its eating quality. However, it won't be nutritionally sound. However, if we have an oat grain that has a good balance of beta-glucan that can provide health benefit and good amount and a good balance grain quality, it produces a product which will be of superior quality from all angles. And in Australia, the Australian growers as well as breeders work very hard to develop oat grains that have a good balance of beta-glucan content as well as grain quality. So additionally, we've done some analysis on the Australian growers, and we've found that they have very high amount of minerals in comparison to other cereals, and also have good balanced unsaturated fatty acids that can promote heart health. So these are some of the additional drivers or oat, health benefits of oats that one can focus on. So we've also done a lot of work of incorporating oats in noodles, and we've been doing this work by focusing on using both Australian and Chinese oats. We wanted to produce oat wheat noodles with higher accumulation, higher incorporation of oats, which was about more than 50%, and produce a product which is of longer shelf life, and therefore dried oat noodles is what we focused on. However, because oats lacks gluten, it limits its utilization in wheat-based products. However, we managed to overcome these challenges and develop a processing technology to increase the incorporation of oats to above 50% and develop a product which had very superior eating quality, as well as for the panelists, as well as it was nutritionally quite good. So how did we prepare it? We mixed all the dry ingredients with saline water, and we sheeted it, we cut it, then dried it to develop this product. So when oats is incorporated in a wheat-based noodle, because of the beta-glucan that absorbs more water, there is lower firmness in oat wheat noodles in comparison to 100% wheat noodles. However, for Australian oat varieties, in comparison to Chinese oat varieties, we saw Australian oat varieties were less firmer. And within the Australian oat varieties, the varieties which had higher elasticity and cohesiveness had a more balanced eating quality and texture, as noted by or commented by the Chinese sensory panels. As well as for Chinese varieties, however, we saw that there are higher readings for the texture, and they lack that balanced eating quality as commented by the Chinese sensory panels. For the color, we saw clearly from this photograph, it can be seen that oat noodles are less brighter and less whiter in comparison to wheat noodles. And our Chinese sensory panel commented that they would prefer wheat noodles mimicking the color of oats. However, they would prefer a brighter color in comparison to a darker colored noodles. So we did compare the brightness of Australian oat incorporated noodles, and we saw that Australian oat incorporated noodles were brighter than the Chinese oat incorporated wheat noodles. So for oat rice is an analog to white rice, and it is processed by removing the outer bran layer, which is also known as pearling. And oat rice is cooked and consumed along with white rice in China. However, there are challenges in processing oat rice in Asian market. Sometimes these oats are excessively pearled, and like I've discussed before, that removes the beta-glucan from the grain, reducing its nutritional quality. Or sometimes they are inadequately processing these oat grains and thereby not deactivating the rancidity causing enzymes and reducing the shelf stability of these products. So what effect pearling has on oat groats? Well, pearling helps to increase the brightness because we are removing the outer bran layer, as it can be seen in the graph on the right-hand side. Pearling also helps to reduce the cooking time because you're removing the bran that causes striations on the grain, and that helps in better seepage of water and heat, thereby cooking the grain quicker. It improves the eating quality. And in AGIC, we have managed to develop processing technology by controlled pearling and using Australian oat varieties, where the beta-glucan content did not change in the grain after pearling. So some of the quality analysis that we conducted showed that Australian oats produced oat rice which were lower in hardness, higher in adhesiveness, lower in chewiness in comparison to Chinese varieties processed into oat rice, and these were preferred by the Chinese sensory panelists. Additionally, they also preferred the color of Australian oat rice, which were more golden yellow and higher in brightness. So in conclusion, I would like to mention that superior Asian oat products are possible to be processed using Australian oats. Australian oats had varietal variation, making it more versatile to be used for different type of oat-based food products. Balanced oat grain quality is extremely important to produce superior quality products. Beta-glucan and additional health drivers make oats an ideal grain to be incorporated in our daily diets. And AGIC and its collaborators have increased the technical understanding of drivers for oat quality and innovative oat foods. Going forward, in our current work, we have been focusing on some other angles, and we have developed a prototype to process 100% whole meal oat wheat noodles without the addition of any additives. And also we have developed a new technology to improved technology of versatile oat rice, which has better milling yield. And currently, the AGIC's research team is looking at optimizing these two processes. We are also looking for industrial collaboration and also additionally developing other new oat-based products. And we want to see these products moving from our lab benchtop into the market shelf through commercialization. So for the next 12 months, some new oat-based food concepts that we are working on are oat inclusion in beverages, such as the bubble tea pearls, or oat inclusion in Southeast Asian style products like tempeh and steam buns, etc. So I would like to take the opportunity to, invite any of y'all who are interested in the health benefits or benefits of Australian oats for their markets or business new product development. Please feel free to contact us. As I have mentioned earlier, that we are looking forward to doing collaborative work as we want to understand the Southeast Asian market better. In summary, just want to mention that we listen to our customers. Australian oats suit your market requirements. Australia will remain a stable supplier of oats. Australia produces unique food grade oats with superior grade quality. And 2021 seasonal start looks favorable, and Australia is technically engaged to fully support our oats customer internationally. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Shaburi. That was a great overview of some of our research. Okay, so this brings us to the end of all our presentations, and it is now time. We do have a few questions already in the Q&A tab, but also it is now time for you to start typing and asking those questions and/or providing any comments you might have. I might actually start perhaps with you, Shaburi. A couple of questions. One was earlier in your presentation you suggested that about 3 grams of beta-glucan are available from 75 grams of porridge or oats. How about oat noodles and oat rice? Do we have a feel for how much would we need to eat to still achieve that target of 3 grams of beta-glucan?
Yeah, all right. Thanks for the question. So I think the whole idea for Egypt to move beyond breakfast style was that we don't have to stress about having that entire 75 gram of oats in one meal. So in a day, 3 grams of beta-glucan will provide the health benefits. So if we may, through oat rice and oat noodles and breakfast, if we are consuming oats, we can be very sure we are having at least 75 gram, if not more.
Sure. Good. Thank you. And another one is, what challenges have you faced in making noodles out of non-gluten flour?
Well, we all know what how gluten helps to make noodles, because it has that, viscoelastic property, and without it, it was very difficult to make very cohesive noodles, and therefore we had to use innovative ways of making sure the noodles don't fall apart, really.
Sure. Okay, thank you. There's a couple of a few questions of general nature. Some of you asking if the material from today would be available for later references. Definitely yes. So we will, in about a week's time, follow up with all of you who have registered or attended today's webinar and provide you with the links to the recorded version of today's webinar. So you will have access to all the material we presented today. As I said, in about this time next week, the links and all material will be ready. So we will be in contact with you about this time next week. A couple of other questions here. So one is on Australian. Is Australian white wheat available for export? Definitely yes. So firstly, all of our milling wheat in our system is white wheat.
applies for every single grade or every single class of our wheat, all the way from ASW, APW, AH, APH, and also our soft, our noodle wheat, ANW and APWN. So they are all white wheat varieties. In addition to that, about 75% of total national production of our wheat is exported. So Australia is not the largest producer of wheat by any means. We do not have the land to produce the quantities, for example, of US or Russia, for example. But considering our, relatively speaking, small domestic population, and therefore small domestic requirements, most of our wheat, not just wheat, many other crops are actually exported. So anything that's exported or produced as a milling wheat in our country is white wheat. Our entire wheat industry is based on white wheat varieties. Our production is based on natural conditions and natural rainfall. So we do see variation from season to season in terms of our production. So occasionally there might be a limited supply, but anything that's exported certainly is white wheat. Anything that's produced to start with, it's white wheat. We will not have, fingers crossed, there's still a little bit left in the season until we start harvesting and get the crop up off the ground, but we are looking at another breaking season, and there certainly will be plenty of supply out of Australia this harvest. I hope that satisfies the question on white wheat available for export out of Australia. A couple of other questions here. Since ANW and APWN, so our partial waxes, is genetically controlled, is it considered genetically modified? Okay, no, we are not talking about any sort of genetic modification. In fact, there's no genetically modified commercially grown wheat anywhere on the planet, and certainly Australia isn't even doing much of the research, to be honest, in that space. We understand very well that our customers, our markets do not wish to have genetically modified wheat. Therefore, our industry has not moved, is not considering to move into that space anytime soon. In fact, as I said, anyway, in the world, there's no commercial production of genetically modified wheat. What I was talking about here is the genes naturally present in wheat. So our breeders, for example, have got ways and tools and knowledge how to select genes from different parents of wheat to, for example, make wheat white or red. So that is genetically controlled. It's not genetically modified, but it's controlled by the selection of genes. Our breeders know very well how to select genes for more or less yellow pigment in our wheat, i.e. your flour or your noodle products. And in a very similar way, our breeders know how to select partial waxy starch versus non-partial waxy starch. So that's all controlled by the knowledge, molecular markers that breeders have available, and all through the normal natural selection of breeding within the breeding tools, so selecting or not selecting certain genes that we know control certain quality traits. So we are talking about perfectly normal breeding tools, not genetically modified wheat or starch in any way. Again, if more background is required, please feel free to keep those questions coming and or follow up with us at a later stage. Certainly more than happy to provide more background.
So another question here on our A&W and APWN. So firstly, I'm pleased to see questions coming up on our two partial vaccine types. And I, as I said, do look forward to collaborating or working more closely with some of you on looking into these two types more closely for perhaps some new products in your market. The next question is on are the A&W and APWN the only partial vaccine types in Australian system? Yes, so if some of you, or if not most of you, would be familiar with our milling grades available for export. So typically we tend to divide them into wheat for hard milling wheat, so our APH, highest protein content, AH, APW and ASW. So they all are what I refer to as normal starch, so non-partial waxes, typically used for a range of different applications, including noodles, baked products, flatbread, steam products, and so on. We then have our soft wheat, which also is normal starch, and these two specialty classes, which are the only two classes where the breeders actually have to focus on the unique properties or swelling properties of starch. And so it is only A&W and APWN where we specifically our breeders breed for this, the partial vaccines types. So all other types, milling wheats, as I said, particularly from your market perspective, we typically tend to see a lot of AH, APH, APW, so they're all normal types, if you like, of starch. The breeding doesn't specifically focus on having that starch different in any ways. Just maybe, so you've got one other, again, on touching on the potential ways to collaborate. As I said, more than happy to discuss that in a one-on-one arrangement and certainly find ways that would suit both parties on how best to go about collaboration, but certainly a starting point, yes, definitely can be on perhaps sharing some of our samples with you, providing you with some either flour that we've already prepared and we have done some preliminary research on, and or perhaps some grains that you can do your own testing and milling and explore some of those options at your own end. So with that, I think we've just about covered all questions we had in our Q&A tab. So first of all, thank you all again for your time and attendance today. Thank you very much for participating and completing our wheat quality surveys. We do have one little other, a very quick 1 minute of your time before you leave us today, our little exit survey. Again, it is a quick measure for us to understand firstly how we went today and hopefully improve from here until our next event. And that next event for the Philippines will be our webinar on our wheat for baking applications, which we look forward to seeing you at on the 11th of November. So stay safe, stay well. Thank you very much for your time today. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar for the Philippines bread baking market, and that's going to be on Thursday, the 11th of November. Take care. We do look forward to seeing you soon again. Thank you very much. See you soon. Bye.